We mourn alongside Iran's people of the tragic martyr-like death of the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and we share in your grief. But this grief has united Iran's people, who have not succumbed to the pressure orchestrated by the United States and other countries that joined in, have stood firm in this struggle, and I am sure will ultimately prevail.
As Iran bids farewell to its slain supreme leader, one of Russia's most powerful figures has arrived in Tehran, carrying a message that echoes far beyond the funeral grounds. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council and one of President Vladimir Putin's closest allies, attended the farewell ceremony for Ayatollah Ali Khamenei on July 3rd. His presence was a signal, deliberate and unmistakable, of Moscow's unwavering support for the Islamic Republic at one of the darkest moments in its modern history. After paying his respects, Medvedev met Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. He praised Iran's resilience, declaring that its people had refused to bow to what he called relentless pressure from the United States and its allies. And then he went further. Medvedev described Khamenei's death as nothing less than a martyr's sacrifice. Coming from the man who once sat in the Kremlin as president, those words were not diplomatic filler. They were a statement of alignment, spoken inside Tehran, in the middle of a funeral the entire world is watching. To understand the weight of this moment, go back to February 28th. According to Iranian authorities, that is when the war took its most devastating turn, as the United States and Israel allegedly launched coordinated strikes deep inside Iran. In the opening wave, Khamenei's heavily guarded compound was hit, killing the 86-year-old supreme leader along with several members of his family, including, according to Iranian officials, his grandchildren. The killing sent shockwaves across the region, and it turned this funeral into something far larger than the burial of one man. Russia's reaction was immediate and blunt. President Vladimir Putin denounced the killing as what he called a cynical assassination, accusing Iran's adversaries of crossing a dangerous line. The strike also left Mojtaba Khamenei, the late leader's son, seriously wounded, according to reports. Though later named Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba has yet to appear in public, fueling speculation over the extent of his injuries and the uncertainty now surrounding Iran's leadership. A wounded successor, a buried father, and a superpower openly calling it assassination. That is the backdrop to this week. Even as the region braces for fresh turmoil, Russia has doubled down on its alliance with Tehran. Moscow has repeatedly condemned the US-Israeli military campaign, branding it an unprovoked act of armed aggression, and it has reaffirmed its strategic partnership with the Islamic Republic. And it was under Putin's orders, according to the reporting, that Medvedev traveled to Tehran to represent Russia at the funeral. At the Imam Khomeini Mosalla, he stood in solemn silence before the late leader's coffin, an image that captured the deepening Moscow-Tehran axis at a moment when the region stands on edge. The funeral ceremonies themselves are unfolding on an extraordinary scale. Following the official rites, a massive public procession is set for July 6th, before the ceremonies move to the holy city of Qom on July 7th. Khamenei's final journey will end in Mashhad, where he is expected to be laid to rest at the revered Imam Reza shrine on July 9th. Hours before the official funeral began, thousands of mourners had already flooded the streets outside Tehran's Grand Mosalla, and state television broadcast scenes of crowds swelling through the night. Iranian authorities expect millions to pour into Tehran, in what could become one of the largest public gatherings in the country's modern history, drawing inevitable comparisons to the funeral of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in 1989. Across the country, crowds chanted slogans in support of the Islamic Republic, while directing fierce anger toward the United States and Israel. For the Iranian state, the sheer scale of the mourning is itself a message that the strike meant to break the country's leadership has instead pulled its people into the streets. On Friday, Khamenei's flag-draped coffin lay in state at Tehran's Grand Mosalla, surrounded by the coffins of family members killed in the strike. Among them, according to Iranian officials, were his son-in-law, his eldest daughter, his 14-month-old granddaughter, and the wife of the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who himself remains out of public view after reportedly being wounded in the attack. It was a scene of profound mourning, and a stark reminder that this conflict has claimed not only a nation's leader, but much of an entire family. In Iranian state coverage, those coffins have become the emotional core of the funeral. Images repeated hour after hour, binding personal loss to national grievance in a way no speech ever could. Among the mourners, grief mixed with defiance. One described the late leader as a man who, in their words, powerfully stood up to the powers and protected the freedom and independence of Iran and Muslims. Another said his defining trait was seeking honor, wanting Iranians to be, as they put it, loved, proud, and steadfast. Others spoke of the new leader, saying his position so far had been, in their words, authoritative and anti-imperialist, and that a bright future awaits Iran. And one mourner captured the rawest emotion in the crowd, saying the desire for revenge would never be extinguished, but that the least the nation could do for its martyred imam was to give him a magnificent funeral. Those voices matter because they reveal what this funeral is becoming. In the language of the crowds, Khamenei is not simply a deceased head of state. He is a martyr, and his death is being woven into the founding story of a new era, under a new leader, with Russia standing visibly at Iran's side. That narrative is being built deliberately, in the slogans, in the state broadcasts, in the choice to carry his coffin through 3 cities over nearly a week, and it will outlast the funeral itself. Several mourners said the war had shown them, in their words, the true intentions of America and Israel, and that they would not trust them again. Whatever comes next in the negotiations, that sentiment, multiplied across millions, is now part of the political landscape. Any Iranian leader who signs a deal with Washington will have to sell it to a public that has just spent a week burying its supreme leader and his family. And any American negotiator who ignores that reality risks misreading how much room Tehran actually has to compromise.
The most important trait the Supreme Leader possessed, which both friend and foe acknowledge, was his pursuit of dignity. He always wanted Iran and Iranians to be dignified, held high, and to be powerful and resolute. And this pursuit of dignity was, so to speak, accompanied by wisdom. It was truly wise and pragmatic, which is how those 3 principles governing our foreign policy were formed under his guidance: dignity, wisdom, and expediency.
On this day, when world leaders came to pay their respects to our martyred leader, what qualities of the Supreme Leader did they mention?
Freedom, the pursuit of justice, independence, and the honor and pride that he truly brought to all Muslims. There is almost no country in the world that America seeks to dominate where they are able to stand up against America. Our leader stood firmly against all powers and defended the independence and freedom of our country and the Muslims, and this is something exceptional in the whole.
Which brings us back to Medvedev, standing before the coffin. His presence in Tehran was more than condolence. It was choreography, a public declaration that Russia sees its future tied to Iran's, precisely when Washington is trying to shape what comes after the war. For Moscow, the calculation is plain. A defiant Iran anchors Russia's position across the Middle East, keeps pressure on Washington, and proves that America's adversaries do not stand alone. For Tehran, a visible Russian embrace at its most vulnerable hour is worth more than any communiqué. As the processions move from Tehran to Qom to Mashhad, the image the Kremlin wanted the world to see has already been delivered. Moscow and Tehran, side by side, at the grave of a leader they both call a martyr. Subscribe to WLA for daily geopolitical analysis.